Hello. Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. I think my reverb is on. Oh my gosh. There we go. That should be a little better. Hi, everybody. I am Arielle Silver, your awkward host for Tomes and Tunes, a show about books and music and who knows what else, creative process, being an artist during a pandemic, what life is like on planet Earth at the moment, all of the things, sometimes spiritual journey. I don't know. Conversation is always different every week. And this week, I am very excited to bring on to the show a fellow named Jeremy Hollander. We met at a Zoom song circle because that's how we roll during COVID. And I really enjoyed his music. I invited him on the show, and I'm going to bring him on in just a moment. I want to let you know, first off, that I'm super excited to be a new official artist of Shub Capos. And so I'm going to share this with you right here. Just because I am excited about being a part of the Shub Capo family, and also I genuinely love this capo. I picked up the Shub, my very first Shub Capo about a year and a half, maybe it was 2 years ago, after years of using those clip-on capos that you can clip onto the head and you can move them around and all that stuff. And then I tried a Shub capo, and it was amazing because it keeps the guitar, it stays in tune as you move the capo up and down the neck. So I'm very excited. Obviously you can see I'm excited, and so it's just great to be a part of that family. So there we go, there's that. What else to tell you? I played a show this past week at Hotel Cafe, and it felt so great to just be in a room with a fantastic sound system. I had played up in Ojai at the Ojai Underground Exchange a few weeks ago, last month, and also same thing, these beautiful independent small venues that really support live music, that support independent artists. They took a hit during this past year, just like musicians have, just like a lot of people have. So, it's a wiggly time. I want to say, get your vaccination, because that is what helps to bring live music back. And right now, during this, up and down roller coaster of a time that we're going through, have your vaccination, put on your mask, go out, support your live music, just see what they're doing on live streams. A lot of these shows, both of those venues, in fact, are doing these hybrid shows where they're in person and live stream ticket options. So it's pretty awesome, and there's a palpable excitement that you can feel in those rooms, that you can feel coming off the stage for artists who haven't performed on a stage, in a really long time. There's something really beautiful about performing. Music is sound waves, and to have it not just go through a microphone into these headphones that we're all wearing lately, but actually to hear what it sounds like to have music in a room, being absorbed by the objects in the room, and also emotionally contemplated, felt, moved, by the people that are in the room that are sharing that space. It's awesome. So support your local venues, your live music venues, and your artists. Hi, Mary Lynn. Hi, Susie. Nice to see you. So great to have you here. And what else do I want to tell you? I'm going to be touring up in the Central Coast of California at the end of this month. So if you're in the Pismo Beach, Paso Robles area, do make sure that you're on my mailing list, and you'll know about those shows. And I got some other things going on as well over the next couple of months. So pretty excited. And now I'm going to bring on Jeremy Hollander. He is, okay, I'll tell you. We had a while back a guest on the show, James Caan. He is a songwriter and a novelist, and he also happened to be one of the doctors. He talked about this on the show. He was one of the doctors that examined E.T. on film in E.T., the film. So he played a doctor on TV. He actually was a real life doctor as well. We have on the show today a real life rocket scientist. I'm super excited about that because I'm nerdy about that kind of stuff. I went to space camp when I was a kid, so this is really fun. But he's also a musician, and that's not such a strange thing. The sciences and music, the arts, they kind of snuggle up next to each other a lot. So super excited. I'm going to bring Jeremy on right now. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, how are you, Arielle?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great, doing great.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I also went to space camp as a kid, so
Wait, we weren't there at the same time, were we? They were like such short, like
yeah, they were like 1 week
long, right?
sessions. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Were you in Huntsville, Alabama?
I was in Huntsville. Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you when you went?
Gosh, I went a couple of times. I think I went when I was like 12 one year, and then another time when I was 16 or something like that.
Yeah, I was 16 when I went. Very cool. I had wanted to go for a really long time, and then my junior year of high school, somehow, it just worked out. Money, time, space.
Right.
Sorry, I can't resist. And it was awesome. It was not, emphasis on space, de-emphasis on camp. When people think of camp, they might think that, it was like sitting around a campfire and gazing at the stars, but it was serious work. It was like long days of study and role playing, a lot of role playing.
Yeah, and they had all these really cool toys. They'd spin you around and make you jump up and down on these like little simulating the moon's
That's right.
gravity, and you got to like, pretend you were in a space mission and be in the simulators. It was a lot of fun. It actually that definitely played a role in inspiring me to like go into the path that I have professionally. So definitely.
And you are working on the SpaceX team.
Yeah, I
right?
work for SpaceX. Yeah.
So, that's just such a clear trajectory for me. I was like, oh yeah, space camp, and then become a songwriter. And it wasn't such a linear path, but for you, it really was more. I mean, as much as life can be linear, you went to space camp, and now you work on space stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always been interested in space stuff since I was a little kid, so I think that was kind of a stepping stone along the way, but it definitely was, kind of on that linear path, if you will.
So so you said ever since you were a kid, can you remember what it was, where it was, like what piqued your interest? How old were you?
Oh, I was young. And I'll tell you, I think there are little snippets of, I mean, that's kind of how life is, right? It's not like one moment usually for things like that, but there are many kind of buildups. And I think the some of the ones that I remember when I was really young, and I don't know exactly how old I was, but elementary school or younger. My grandfather was an engineer, and he worked for General Electric, and he was someone who, I was one of those annoying little kids who would keep asking, like, why is this? How does that work? And
totally. Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, and he would sit me down and tell me, and he'd be like, rather than kind of brush me off of like, whatever kid, he would actually tell me these things, and I remember when I was a kid, I think between a conversation with my grandfather and also watching some, I think, Nova documentary or something like that about the life and death of stars, and about how like all stars, they go from nebulas to stars, and then they explode and destroy their entire solar system. Oh, and by the way, our sun in the sky, it's one of those too, and one day it's going to blow up and destroy us all. And as a kid, that was very like, oh my God, we got to do something about that.
Right, because you're thinking in human time.
Right, exactly.
Totally
like when you're that young, you don't have the like as much of the internalizing the scale of like, no, this is over billions of years, well beyond our lifetime. But I remember as a little kid thinking that, and then as I learned and kind of delved into that, learning about all the things about just like how lucky we are to be on this little rock in space, and how fragile it is, this thing that we have, and how special it is. And so it kind of led me down this career path out of a passion of like, it's an inevitability of we, in order to survive and thrive as a species, like I not to get all doom and gloom, but we need to learn how to survive and thrive off this planet, or someday at some point, billions of years from now, we will be resigned to die upon this planet, which is a heavy thought, And so that I think that realization at a young age made me realize like, oh, this is a multi-generational kind of lifelong, many lives long endeavor that our species needs to tackle. And at a young age, that inspired me to go into the field.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, for me, I mean, I lived in starry places. I lived, not in a city when I was growing up. Um, I lived in nature, and I love to fall asleep. My window in one of the places I lived in, a lot of different places. One of the places I lived in was in New Jersey for 9 years, and I lived on the side of a mountain, and my bedroom window faced the woods and the lake, but it was on the side of a mountain, so it was all sloping down. So I had a lot of sky as well. And I would move my pillow so that I was underneath the moonbeams whenever it was shining from, through the window, so that I would fall asleep that way. There was just something about the moon and the stars, and just looking out. I had a little telescope, and
Yeah.
was just really fascinated by that. I think for me, in the end, as the years went by, I think that my fascination was more um, metaphorical and contemplative on that front, rather than wanting to actually learn the this, not to not learn the science, but didn't want to be down and dirty in the math of it. There's a lot of that. I wanted to be moved by it, to feel that contemplation, more philosophical, I guess, than applied.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. And I also have that, like, that there are many ways in which I have been tugged in the direction that I have. And that,
Yeah.
that is, I can't deny that is also part of it, of like kind of the poetic kind of romanticism of the frontier and how small we
Yeah.
are and how big the universe is. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think, what I said earlier was kind of a more practical line of thinking of like, here's why space is important. And it
For
is.
sure,
But,
yeah.
but it's interesting because we as humans, whenever we go out and explore, whatever, however far we send our space robots out, and send people to the moon decades ago, it's all really about learning about ourselves and
Yeah.
our place in the
Yeah.
universe. Like we look outward and we peer into the depths of the universe, but we're really learning about our own home and our place in the universe. And I think there is a more of a intuitive poetic draw that we as humans, we yearn for that. We're explorers at heart, and I think that also drew me as well. Like for the reasons you're talking about, of like falling asleep in a mote of moonbeam, and
Yeah.
and looking at the starry expanse of a night sky and going, wow, that looks big and beautiful. That's part of
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah, it's funny, but as you're talking, I'm thinking there are a lot of professional fields that we go into whose origin is really in romance,
Hmm.
and just like that wondering, that contemplation, like that romantic notion of, what's up there, and then before you know it, you're a rocket scientist. You're like it's like, wait, I actually really kind of want to know, like, what is out there, and how does that work, but what you're saying also makes me think about, since this is tomes and tunes, and eventually we'll talk about books. What you're saying, it also makes me think about fiction versus nonfiction, and how a lot of times fiction holds so much truth about the real world and our real lived lives, and we can understand that truth because we're not reading about ourselves necessarily. We're reading about these imagined characters, these fictional times and places. And what you're saying is bumping up against that idea for me, because it's like, oh yeah, when we're looking out into space, better understanding our own world. When you look at the unfamiliar, you can see the familiar perhaps a little better.
Yeah,
I guess is what it
absolutely.
is. Yeah. So awesome. So you contemplated these questions when you were a kid, and your grandfather entertained you, or took you seriously, and gave you
Yeah.
answers. My grandfather, I love my grandfather, and I'm also a yoga teacher and yoga studio owner, and so I think that this is maybe my grandfather's influence, which is that when I would ask too many questions, he would finally say, "Let's have a few moments of silent meditation." And that was his way of like, instead of like, let me explain how the world works. He was like, you know what? Let's just be quiet now.
That's a friendly way of saying "shut up, kid."
It really is. My grandfather is he's got some nice manners. So you lived in Ohio. You grew up there.
Yes.
I think I was in Cincinnati maybe one time. Don't really remember Cincinnati very well. And then you moved to Ann Arbor for a while.
Yep. Went to
I've
school in Ann Arbor. Yeah.
never been there. I've heard it's a really fantastic town. What was Ann Arbor like? Can you tell a little bit about it from your perspective?
Yeah, Ann Arbor was a great town. I mean, Ann Arbor. What was cool about it is it's a college town. I feel like when you go to Ann Arbor, like there's some people who are the townies who live there. But I guess, and I probably saw a particular subset, like a particular view and filter as a student there, both an undergraduate and then later a grad student there. But what I saw was the town and the campus were very intermingled. It was a very walkable town. You could get anywhere by walking or by bus. They had great public transportation. They had the big blue bus that would go all over town, and it was great because I feel like, especially that was kind of, coming into my adulthood, if you will, there, it was a great little town that was not as overwhelming as, like, there's some big cities like Los Angeles or New York where it's just like you get, dropped into the deep end of here's very much city. And Ann Arbor, I feel like, was big enough that it had, one of everything as far as restaurants and, coffee shops and bars and things like that, but it wasn't so overwhelmingly huge. And it also had a very vibrant art and music scene. Kind of late high school and early college was when I really started getting into songwriting in a big way. And I remember I was part of like a poetry group in Ann Arbor where I'd share some of the poems and songs that I'd written, and kind of like it was a great place to come of age, if you will. And just a great town. I miss it. I miss it dearly. It's a cool place.
So when did you start writing songs? Was it there?
If I go back to like my earliest songs that I've ever written, which are songs
go back
that
there.
which are songs that I dare not play in public.
I won't ask you.
Probably when I was a kid at summer camp was when I really started writing stuff like that was, music and
You
poetry.
were that guy. You were that guy with the guitar at summer camp.
It's funny because that was like pre me being that guy. I feel like I've become that guy. But when I was a kid, when I was a young kid at summer camp, again, this is like going back to like age 12. I mean, and this is not, I went to space camp, but I also went to another summer camp that was more of a
Swimming.
Tennis, swimming, canoeing,
campfires, right.
campfires. It was more of what people think of when they think of summer camp. Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't play guitar at that age. I'd always played music. I played cello since I was 10 years old, and I still play cello. But it was summer camp was where I first picked up the guitar. Later in high school kind of age, like around 16, 17, I think it was, and learned a few chords. But I'd always written poetry. And kind of late high school, kind of around that time was when I started writing my earliest of songs, which were full of teen angst, as those songs of that age often are. But that's probably about when I started writing music and poetry in a big way. And then that kind of grew and blossomed from there.
Do you still write poetry, or does it now mostly get channeled into lyrics for music?
Occasionally, most of it does get channeled into lyrics for music. I love poetry, and I think what's interesting, the distinction is, when I was younger, I used to write a lot of more kind of free-form poems that didn't necessarily have as much mind to rhyme and meter, but still had a lot of meaning. And I still love that, playing with metaphors and playing with, language that need not necessarily follow that strict kind of the guidelines and like the box that you place a song in, even though that's quite a big box of lots of ways you can write a song. But I think one of the things I enjoy about songwriting as someone who was a poet first, before I really introduced music into my poetry, is that it's like if you look at like a haiku, or if you look at a sonnet, there are these kind of, things that you have to follow of like, however many syllables in the rhyme and the meter. A song is no different. It's a challenge to try to fit into that particular format, and still has quite a bit of flexibility within that format. But I think it's fun to play with words, to get the the meaning and convey the emotion, and there's an art to it that I really enjoy, and really enjoy putting what's in here,
Yeah.
out into the world. So
Yeah, I too really enjoy the creative constraints of structure.
yeah.
And when I mean, I have a gazillion journals. I don't know that I ever really called it poetry, what I would write. But there was poetry, there was prose, there were pictures, there were all kinds of doodles and notes and just ideas that I would drop into these spiral notebooks when I was in high school, and then later these art sketchbooks when I was in college, and now my uh, my moleskin books. I just have to interject here and say that if you Google how do you pronounce moleskin, you'll come up with something that's like moleskine, moleskine, like all these things. It's really funny. So I can't even say the name of it correctly because I just have that like those pronunciations running in my head. But anyway, um, but over the years I've really grown to love more and more the structural constraints of songwriting. And I think when I was a new songwriter, for me that started in college. I too played music from an early age. I've been playing clarinet, still do, since I was, I think 8 was when I started. Um, and my early songwriting days, the songs were, I gave no mind to how many syllables and making lines parallel to each other, or in rhyme or rhythm, or it was a little, it was just, okay, how can I more or less get the melody with more or less this line. But now I'm pretty persnickety, and
Hmm.
if I choose to violate the rule that I set up in the line before, then it's a conscious choice to violate it, you know. um,
Yeah, and you kind of learn these. I don't know if you want to call them tricks of the trade. I guess I'd call them tricks of the trade because when I've found in early music, yeah, you just kind of like you kind of fumble your way through it and bump into walls and kind of blindly eventually maybe as something that sounds like a song comes out.
yeah,
And I feel like I've definitely run into that of now I'm a lot more picky with my words and with my choices of how I even structure the song.
yeah,
Um, and I'll tell you one thing that I fought early on in my songwriting that I feel like I'm a lot more conscious of now is I always had a habit of trying to pack too many words into a song,
yeah,
into a and it would just be a mouthful. And it's like, where do you catch your breath? And I've
yeah,
learned that there is such a thing as giving space and letting it breathe. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. Since you learned cello, of course I'm assuming learned the written music, how to read sheet
I
music, right?
I did. I actually I'm one of those oddballs who can only read bass clef. I'm still not fluent in reading treble clef, but like, yeah, yes.
Totally. Um, but even so, when you're just learning music, right from the very beginning, you're learning not only the notes but the rests.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and yet,
Absolutely.
as songwriters, I can relate to what you're saying, like not paying any attention at all to the rests, or to the space, to the silence, but just thinking that if we fill every nook and cranny, then we have music. But
Right.
really, music is sort of it's both parts of that. It's the silence and the sound.
Yeah, and kind of the metaphor or the kind of analogy that I've come to think of it as is I love going camping, and I grew up going backpacking with some really close friends of mine, and I remember we would make campfires at night, and we'd start it from nothing, and I remember in the times that we were less successful or kind of slower to get the fire going was when we'd throw a bunch of wood into the fire, a bunch of sticks, and it just try to like get and it would smoke and sputter and not really. But what really got the fire to get going was when you removed those and gave it air, gave it
Yeah,
space, and that allowed the fire to breathe, and you got that good mix of both the fuel and the air that it needed, and that space was what allowed it to thrive and grow. And I feel like that's a good analogy with lots of things, but songwriting in
yeah,
particular, of the space and the rests, and the being very selective in how you use them, is part of it.
I love that.
Where to write words and where not to.
Yeah, that's great. So how is songwriting like space science?
There are some similarities and there are plenty of differences, but I think what I enjoy about both and where they are similar is they're both creative processes. They are, when you're designing something for a rocket or a spaceship, you have a challenge that you need to overcome, and you get creative about, what are the constraints, what are the various tools at your disposal, and eventually you kind of pick and chip away at it, and it's like anything else in life where you can have this big insurmountable task of like, oh, I have to design this whole thing for a rocket, or a rocket engine in the case of what I've been working on these days, but you break it down into individual small chunks, and each one is achievable and bite-sized in and of itself. And I find that the creative process with songwriting is, while the tools are different and the constraints are different, it still has tools and your kind of painter's palette, and you still have constraints of, I need rhyme and meter, and I want it to be this long, and and there's some flexibility. And then it's the same kind of thing of like, one line at a time, one verse at a time. What's the song going to be about? What's the chorus and the hook? And then what are the couplets that kind of, fill in the verses? And, do I like it the way I've set it up this way, or do I want to move it around? And it's still that kind of, the creative process at its skeleton, at its core, is very much the same, even though the tools and the constraints are different.
So when you come to write a song, I mean, I assume when you're working on an engine, for example, you know what you need at the end. Right? Like maybe you don't know how to get from point A to the end, from the first step to the end, but you know what you're building. When you write a song, do you know what you're building when you start? Or do you kind of walk down the path and figure it out along the way? Is it a process of discovery in itself?
It's interesting because I've written songs both ways. And there are many ways to write a song. Obviously, I know some people, you can go online or read books about like formulaic, here's how you write a song, and it's like everybody approaches it differently. I know two songs have, I like to say they write themselves often. I'm part of the journey, but sometimes these songs take a life of their own. I've done it multiple ways, where sometimes it's an act of discovery where I don't know where the song is going or what it's going to turn into, and often I'll like think, oh, this song is heading in this direction, then it takes a left turn, and before you know it, you have a song written. You're just like, I did not see that one coming. Like, where did that come from deep in the, and your subconscious and your kind of, your soul kind of guides you in that way. And I've also done it the other way, where I will very consciously say, I'm writing a song about this. And I think it lends itself to a different flavor of song. And what I've learned over the years of songwriting is to be flexible, even if I'm approaching a song thinking I'm going to write about one thing. Like, sure, that's a starting point, and the important thing is to get started and to take steps down that road, and then as you do, you will uncover the rest as you go. Sometimes you follow the map, sometimes you go off road, and sometimes you end at the top of the mountain that you were shooting for, and sometimes you end at the top of a completely different mountain, but it's still a beautiful view.
Yeah, you've totally got it. You're right in that it's different every time. Gosh, I'm just reflecting. I'm kind of running through a list of songs in my head of my own, and thinking, reviewing, how did that one come about? Was it, was it that process of discovery? And I think that either way, often what will happen for me in a song is that somewhere my brain pulls a word that I wasn't expecting. Maybe it's because the rhyme was set up beforehand, and so then my brain is just associating on the rhymes, or maybe it's a visual idea. Somehow a word shows up that surprises me, and a lot of times that word suddenly in the game, gives it a turn that I wasn't expecting somehow. Maybe it changes the whole song and what the song is about, or it might just in one line give some deeper meaning or some other secondary meaning that I wasn't expecting when I sat down at my desk that day. It is a process of discovery. I love that. Yeah.
It is.
So we are sitting here with tomes and tunes, and so I have to ask you, what are you reading? What have you been reading?
Yeah. So what I'm reading today, what I'm in the middle of, I'm actually just a few chapters in. I have it right here. Is It's actually Bill Gates's book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, and it's something that I think we were mentioning as we were kind of chatting right before the show started. Of throughout these past many months, year and a half of this pandemic, I've had a hard time approaching nonfiction heavy books. The books I've been reading have been kind of lighter, kind of, mystery thriller, kind of Michael Crichton, Stuart Woods kinds of books that are just lighter, because all the heaviness that's been going on in the world, it's kind of hard to be like, okay, I'm going to use that brain power to focus on one more heavy thing. But lately, in these past many months, I've been approaching books that are a little bit more, I guess, deeper, if you will, and this is one of them. Where one of the things where I've been focusing my personal attention these days is on climate change.
I like the optimism of that title.
Yeah,
As if we haven't, as if there's one coming down the road that we could learn how to avoid, not as if we have already driven headfirst into a number of them.
Well, and I'll tell you, I agree with the optimism, because I'll tell you, kind of relating it back to you were asking me about rocket science and what I do professionally. I'll tell you, if nothing else, one of the things that I've learned in doing what I do is that when you get a group of people together who are single-mindedly focused and running in the right direction, humans can do great things on massive scales. I think climate change and how to avoid a climate disaster is certainly a massive challenge and a huge undertaking, and is the moonshot of our time. It's among the largest kind of endeavors of challenges that we will undertake as a species. But I'm optimistic that if we can get our act together and all be running in the same direction, which is a big if, and I think that's like the big challenge. I think we can overcome it. I think it's just a matter of we need to get out of our own way, or rather we need to like assist one another and kind of be all running in the same direction, because we are our own worst enemy in this challenge. The problem is hard enough. We don't need to be stopping ourselves from fighting it. But I am optimistic, and I share the optimism of the book and its title.
Yeah, you said all of us running in the same direction, and maybe we don't need all of us, but just a lot.
Yeah, most of us, you hope.
Right? Yeah. The simple majority maybe would help. Is there a passage from that book or something related that you could share?
Yeah, I'll tell you,
language. I ask my guests to share a little passage because I love language and how writers choose to express ideas. So anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually looking for a passage in the book. It's interesting because I'll read a passage from a different book, and I'll explain in a second why I feel like this book is a great book, but it's written very much like an essay, is how I see it. It's like it's here's what I'm about to tell you, then I tell you, then here's some supporting details, and then I summarize, here's what I just told you, which is an interesting way of talking about a book about climate change, but it's very straightforward.
Right, and there's a rhetorical reason for the book, right? So he wants to he's trying to make an argument, so he's telling you what the argument's going to be, and okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think as far as a passage I would love to read, and I have a couple of, I can pick a couple of choice ones from, I think, talking about both space and climate change and how fragile our planet is. I wanted to read a passage from Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, which is a great book written, of course, by the late Carl Sagan about our exploration into the solar system, but it kind of mentions a lot of the things that what we were just talking about how even though exploring space, it's about finding our place in the universe, but it's really kind of inward looking on ourselves. So yeah, if I were to read those, which I think kind of shares the sentiment we've been talking about, I'll read a couple passages.
Yeah.
So, we were wanderers from the beginning. We knew every stand of tree for 100 miles. When the fruits or nuts were ripe, we were there. We followed the herds in their annual migrations. We rejoiced in fresh meat. Through stealth, feint, ambush, and main force assault, a few of us cooperating accomplished what many of us, each hunting alone, could not. We depended on one another. Making it on our own was as ludicrous to imagine as was settling down. Working together, we protected our children from the lions and the hyenas. We taught them the skills they would need. and the tools. And then, as now, cooperation and technology was the key to our survival. And I think another passage that I would like to read, if you don't mind, because I think it summarizes some. I think Carl Sagan is an amazing poet in his own right, kind of talking about like internalizing the romanticism of looking outward and how that is kind of introspectively looking inward. And I'll read the passage that the title Pale Blue Dot where it comes from, because the for those who are watching who don't know what Pale Blue Dot, where the title is, it was one of the Voyager space probes when it was flying out towards the outer planets, towards Jupiter and Saturn. As it was flying away from Earth, it right before Earth went out of sight completely, it turned around and took a picture of Earth. And it was barely just a speck in the camera, just this little blue dot that looked like any other star. And it was this really cool picture that it's kind of like looking back, like that little dot is everything. That's Earth. And then it kind of vanished out of sight into the sea of black, into the cosmos, as the space probe kind of went off into the outer reaches of the solar system. So that's what the title comes from, and this is kind of the passage that talks about that, and where it's saying, look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, ever has been, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and every destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father and hopeful child, every inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals and every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended on a sunbeam. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another, to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
That's what I'm talking about with language.
Yes,
Lovely.
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Lot to think about. Going back to something you said earlier, I do agree that we as a species are explorers. We have these two opposing forces in us constantly. One is to stay safe and kind of protect our energy burn, and sit on the couch and watch, whatever, Ted Lasso. And the other is to, we have to go out and discover, because for all of time, food source was not easily come by. So we have hardwired into us that need for discovery in order to find the food, that the energy for us to exist. And so we have these like two sides of like conserve energy and expend energy, and the expend energy is in service of discovery, or exploring and learning and innovation. And
yeah. Well, and it's interesting because like talking about that in the context of climate change, I think this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is analyzing and looking at how do we move forward. I think it's important to kind of take a step back and understand, how did we get here? And it's exactly as you say. We have been following our instinct for the longest time. And we as humans, we're animals when it comes down to it. We're born in the jungles and learn to survive and thrive based on that instinct, that need to conserve energy, expend that energy only to, like, when we're hunting and gathering, to get the next meal, to just keep on living and surviving. And when you prioritize that kind of way of living, which is kind of deeply programmed in us as a species for forever ago, it lends itself to doing the things that are conserving our own personal energy, even at the expense of the environment around us. Which it's why we say, okay, I want to be comfortable because I need shelter and I need food, so I'll turn on my heating and air conditioning because my instinct says I want to be the right temperature, or I want to get my food at the store because that's the path of least resistance. Why go out and like gather berries in the fields when you can go to Ralph's up the street? And that's like we've learned to kind of our environment just today makes it so easy to channel those instincts and expend energy in the environment to conserve energy,
It's a
our
really
own
great
personal
observation.
energy.
Yeah.
And also kind of along those lines, like we as humans, in order to kind of tackle big problems of our times, like climate change and a number of others, nuclear proliferation and world hunger, all these things, we need to kind of grow beyond our like just being falling back to our instincts. We are humans. We have this gift of a mind that
Right.
we can use and reconcile with our
Right.
kind of our heart instincts to kind of use both of those together to move forward. Because if we only act on the instincts and impulses of our animals, we're going to keep going down the path that we're going down, which is an evolved path to a very different environment than what we've created for ourselves.
Right. Oh, brilliant. Awesome. Love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like that observation about that instinct of conserving our own energy causes us to expend and use resources sort of to an outsized level,
Yeah.
and that those complicated systems that we have invented and created have that's what's creating the imbalance. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. I'm going to share something totally different, I think. So as I mentioned in our pre-show, well, so I'm always reading a few different books, usually on my nightstand, and then also I walk about 4 miles every day, and during that time I either catch up on phone calls or listen to podcasts or listen to audiobooks. And so usually there's an audiobook that's happening and then also some like written word books. I want to say that right now I am audiobook reading Alexander Chee's Edinburgh. It is a phenomenal novel. It reads more like a memoir, but it is a novel as far as I understand. And it is absolutely gorgeous writing. Love it. On my nightstand is Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey, which I just started. I read just the very opening passage of it last week on this show. But the other book that was recently open on my nightstand that I just finished last night was the first book of the Harry Potter series, which I first read back when it came out, or within a few years of when it first came out. And I have not wanted to. I don't read a lot of kid lit in general, but I wanted to revisit those Harry Potter books. So anyway, I'm not going to share that today. And also, the Odyssey didn't seem like it didn't seem at the moment like there was a good passage for me to share on that either. So I pulled off of my shelf a writer that I first discovered in college, and she now holds sort of this space at the center of my heart as one of my favorite writers, even though I have not read even half of her body of work. She's really prolific, but she was very influential on me as both a literary writer and as a songwriter. Just in the way that, speaking of language, the way that she uses language. And so I pulled off from the shelf. I'm going to see if I can find this page that I turned down. Be nice if I could find it. So the writer I'm talking about, her name is Jeanette Winterson. She's a British writer and contemporary British writer. And I pulled up this book, Gut Symmetries. She has I haven't read a lot of her newer books, but she does touch on climate change and environmental justice and things like that in some of her books. She's a very passionate writer as well. I'm just going to read this little passage from this book. Let's see here. Now more than ever, crossing into the 21st century, our place in the universe and the place of the universe in us is proving to be one of active relationship. This is more than a scientist's credo. The separateness of our lives is a sham. physics, mathematics, music, painting, my politics, my love for you, my work, the stardust of my body, the spirit that impels it, clocks diurnal, time perpetual, the roll, rough, tender, swamping, liberating, breathing, moving, thinking nature, human nature, and the cosmos are patterned together. Symmetry, beauty. Perhaps it seems surprising that physicists seek beauty, but in fact, they have no choice. And yet there has not been an exception to the rule. As yet, there has not been an exception to the rule that the demonstrable solution to any problem will turn out to be an aesthetic solution. And that's what I'll share in that.
I like that.
Jeremy, would you be so kind as to play some music for us?
I would love to. Yeah.
What is the song that you're going to play?
Yeah. The song that I picked to play today is actually a song that's kind of along the lines of a lot of what we've been talking about. It's a song that I actually wrote fairly recently. It's a new one that I co-wrote with a friend of mine. The song is called Match Point.
What is it called?
Match Point.
Match Point.
Yeah, it's kind of a symbolic of our times, if you will. So.
Great.
Coming in all right? Food on your table, clothes on your back, and shelter from the storm. It took generations to come this far for these problems to be born. We borrowed from tomorrow to pay the debts of yesterday. Now the waters are rising and the forests are burning. We've gotten lost along the way. Now we're facing our ills because of yesterday's will to survive. We followed our hearts this far in order to thrive. Our minds must reconcile the way forward through the fight that we face. It ain't you against me, it's one planet, it's one human race. And the world turns, the world turns, the world turns around. And the world burns, the world burns, the world burns now. Asleep at the screen with your belly full and your boots still on your feet. But what is the price that we pay every day to keep yourself off of the street? You're straining your toil, burning midnight oil 1 gallon at a time. Your daily desires fit fuel on the fire till the ashes fill the skies. We're facing our ills because of yesterday's will to survive. We relied on our hearts this far in order to thrive. Our minds must reconcile the way forward through the fight that we face. We've a long way to run till we've won as one human race. And the world turns, the world turns, the world turns around. And the world burns, the world burns, the world burns out. Cast the past into the wind, blow the shadows from the sun. The future now begins, what's been undone is yet to come. One by one, let's decide before it gets too late. 'Cause if we can change our ways, we can change our fate. Yeah, yeah, if we can change our ways, we can change our fate. If we can change our ways, we can change our fate. If we can change our ways, we can change our fate. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can change our ways, we can change our fate.
Yeah. I believe that. That's the, we were talking about optimism. I am optimistic that we have a hell of a challenge ahead of us, but we can overcome it. We have some work to do
I
to get there, but we
I
can.
wonder. I wonder if I'm not. I am an optimist. I consider myself a realist, optimistic realist, I guess. Um, and I feel that our best chance is when we can create like the path of least resistance, right? Or normalize something so much that it's no big deal anymore. Like I'm thinking about that transition from plastic to people bringing their own bags to the store, for example.
Yep.
I feel like that took. I guess in parts of the country, maybe it's still not happening, but at least here in Southern California, I feel like it's a normal thing. Like everybody brings their bags, and that's
Yep.
just the way it is. It took a phenomenal amount of time and effort for that transition to happen. It seems, and I think that it's not unlike the resistance that people have to wearing masks at the moment. Actually, it's like not that hard to put a mask on, but
Right.
it is such a weird thing compared with where we were 2 years ago. Um, that it's like it. I don't know. It's like there's still that resistance to it.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
I think part of it is drawing analogies to what we already know, that is easy. Like I'll tell you one that I think of. I mean, not to get into the details of climate change, but like, carbon dioxide is kind of an analogous. It's a an industrial waste, if you will, and you could think of it like garbage, like any other trash that you produce as a person. It's like
Mm.
we have learned not to just like let our trash build up all over our homes or just dump it in our front lawn. We as a society have come together and organized ways to collect our
Mm.
byproducts and our waste and dispose of them properly. And granted, there's plenty of nuances in how to do that better as well. But
Yeah.
it's not that different. Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are just another form of trash that we need to
Right.
normalize cleaning up after ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then you drive down the street and you see someone throw a bag of trash out of the window of their car, and that instinct. Oh, I don't want the trash in my car with me. I have created this thing that I don't that is um, polluting my environment. But then there are these people that are like, well, it's polluting. They don't think about it. It's polluting my environment. I don't want it, so I throw it out.
Yeah,
And it's like that disconnect between, well, you haven't actually gotten rid of it and you are polluting the environment. You have created this trash. So, yeah.
yeah, and I think, even when you were saying that, like the image that came into my mind with that is like nowadays when we see the person who throws the bag out the window, you get angry. You're like, who is that guy? Like that becomes
It's an
that's such an
insult.
obnoxious thing
Yeah.
nowadays, where it's like, and that's kind of what I mean of like the kind of collective consciousness of our society, and maybe this is me in a California bubble, but like, the
Mm.
collective consciousness of society has come to normalize that is inappropriate behavior.
Right. 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 Yeah.
So,
So many great conversations today. This is
yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to take us out, I guess, on a song. Um, this is a somewhat unrehearsed song, so we'll see how it goes. But I wrote it last year, and then this year went through a slew of writing a lot of new songs, and haven't played this one in a while. And then this morning, I was not rehearsing a set for a gig, so I found myself just thinking like, oh, I want to play some of those songs that I haven't played in a little while, and this is one of them that sort of came up. The rehearsal did not go well today of this song, and yet I still want to play it here because I'm a daredevil like that. So let's see here. So this is a song. I played it on the show a number of times last year when it was still new. It's a song that is inspired by. It takes its title from an essay by Cheryl Strayed, who wrote the memoir Wild, which Reese Witherspoon turned into a film by the same name. And that movie and that book are about Cheryl Strayed's. I mean the, you know, the plot of the book, the memoir, is that she's walking the Pacific Crest Trail. And then the journey, of course, the external journey is parallel to the internal journey. She was healing from grief, deep grief at the loss of her mother. But this is a song that's inspired by an essay of hers called, I don't know if this is the full name of the essay, but Ghost Ships. And in the essay, she talks about those other paths that we didn't take in life, how perhaps they're still off on some ghost ship, on some other parallel plane. Those other things that we didn't choose still exist. And her essay, Ghost Ships, itself was inspired by a poem by the Swedish poet Thomas Tranströmer called Blue House. And I didn't realize, I like him quite a lot as a poet, but I didn't realize when I read this essay that it was inspired by that poem. And somehow Blue House ended up in this song as well, but the song is called Ghost Ships. We talked forever about a blue house in a magazine, the orange flames of maple trees in fall. We'd fix the cellar, piano in the living room, a bookcase and curtains in the hall. I made a scrapbook in my mind of future times. Ooh, sailing on ghost ships, out to sea on ghost ships, things we never did. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Maybe winter. Let me try that again. Maybe winter, digging out from snow, the last nor'easter froze us to the core. Or maybe youth, hadn't lived enough to see the way that love can leave you wanting more. By summer we were through House of Blue. Sailing on ghost ships, out to sea on ghost ships, things we never did. Unlived lives on ghost ships, still afloat on ghost ships, lives we never lived. Now and then I hear some news of you. Now and then I hear some news of you. I think I did that wrong. Let's try it again. Now and then I hear some news of you. There we go. It looks like somehow we both made it to the other coast. Do you believe in ghosts? Sailing on ghost ships, out to sea on ghost ships, things we never did. Unlived lives on ghost ships, still afloat on ghost ships, lives we never lived. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts? Something like that.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, it's so fun that Mark and Susie, you are both here. Um, Mark and Susie were often in the Friday night live stream shows that I would play, and I often played this song. Nice to see you both. Thanks for being here. Um, and Jeremy, thank you for such a great conversation. This has really been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and great
Yeah.
conversations. Yeah.
Have you been getting to those Zoom song circles much?
I have some. I haven't been able to make it to the last couple,
Yeah.
but I have, and I've there've been, as you kind of mentioned, now that we're getting out and about, there are more live shows going on these days. But we're in kind of these weird times with
It's a weird time.
yeah.
A
So
little
navigating
dance.
all that. So
I know, it's a dance back and forth, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope to see you in some of them. I don't get to all of them, but I'm still doing them on when they show up as much as I can anyway. And then I hope to get down to Hermosa Beach. I've never spent time down there. It's not that far away. I live up in Burbank, not too
Just
far
across
away.
town. Yeah.
And near the ocean.
Yeah, come enjoy the waters and the
Right.
beaches down here, and
That's
and
right.
yeah, I mean, I certainly I look forward to the next time that we can play music together, share songs again, and all of that. It's always a
Likewise.
pleasure talking with you and sharing music with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Jeremy. And I'm going to say goodbye to you here, and then I'll say goodbye to everybody else. Thank you for being here. So nice to continue this show over these ups and downs and ins and outs and back and forth and all the things that we've been going through. Honestly, these conversations have just, I don't know, they're always different, and there's always something that I learn, something that inspires me. I think about it for like the next week, and then we have another conversation with someone else. And next week's guest for episode 65 is Celia Chavez, and she is one half of the Petty Chavez duo. They sing beautiful harmonies together, and Celia is a magnificent human being. She and I played a show together a few weeks ago up in Ojai at the Ojai Underground Exchange, and so I'm very much looking forward to having her on the show. And then the next week is going to be Simon, so we'll have both halves of the duo split apart by 1 week, by 7 days. So looking forward to that. And what else should I tell you? If you are in the Monrovia area here, I'm going to be at the Wing Walker Brewery playing a bunch of songs on August 21st, which is a Saturday evening. So I would love to see you if you're going to be here. And then I'll be up in the Central Coast in Paso Robles and Pismo at the end of the month. So do stay in touch. Get yourself on my mailing list, and also if you would like to support the show. In general, I say support the guests that are on the show, follow their YouTube channel, their Spotify, get on their mailing lists, find them on Facebook, all of that stuff. Jeremy devotes much of his life, his professional life, to SpaceX, which is awesome and fascinating. And he doesn't have all of those places yet, but keep an eye out for him because his music is beautiful. And if you like planets, also join my Patreon, that little ticker tape that's going on the bottom. You can sign up to support this show and the other stuff that I do in music by signing up for Team Mercury is just $3. And then we have all the planets represented. Sorry, Pluto was voted off of the Patreon, but what can you do? But I would love to have you. I'll say that Team Jupiter is at $45, and that level, if you join, can basically turn into a songwriting craft once a month gathering. So we can talk about if you're interested in getting to songwriting, feedback or thoughts or anything like that. That Team Jupiter once a month Zoom call, that's where we're going to be doing it as a group. So that's all I got for you today. I will see you next week, and until then, please wear your masks, get your shots, be kind to people that you don't know, shower the people you love with love, and I will see you next week at Tones and Tunes.